"Keep recording the nanny," a male voice whispered through the security line, and that was the first mistake that would tear open the Bellini mansion before sunrise. In the East Wing kitchen, Elsie Whitaker stood barefoot on white marble, a very large plus-size woman in a black maid's dress and a white lace-trimmed apron, moving alone beneath the cold chandelier light, as if the room were the only place in Manhattan that had never judged her. 3 floors above, Dante Bellini sat in his dark surveillance room with a glass of untouched whiskey, a dying cigar between 2 fingers, and 20 monitors painting his face blue, while the most dangerous man on the waterfront watched her in absolute silence. Someone on the night staff had laughed earlier, low and cruel, calling her the fat nanny who waddles after rich children. But Elsie had not heard that part. She only heard the hum of the refrigerator, the soft click of her own breath, and the tiny rhythm she had built for herself after midnight, when everyone who looked through her was finally asleep. Her apron swayed with each careful turn. Not clumsy, not ridiculous. Controlled, grounded. A slow circle of one arm, a pause, a measured step backward, the kind of movement used to calm a shaking child without touching them too soon. Dante's eyes narrowed. He had seen dancers in private clubs, trophy wives performing wealth, models floating through galas in silk. This was different. Elsie was not performing for anyone. She was surviving in the only language the mansion had not managed to steal from her. On the lower right monitor, the kitchen camera flickered once. Dante noticed because Dante Bellini noticed everything. The timestamp jumped half a second forward, then corrected itself as if nothing had happened. His bodyguards, 2 silent men in black suits near the reinforced door, did not move. Neither did he. Elsie turned again, her pale hand brushing the edge of the marble island, and for one breath her reflection appeared in the polished surface beside a red wine stain that should have been cleaned hours ago. She saw it. Her movement stopped, not from embarrassment, from recognition. Her shoulders settled, heavy and steady, as if her body knew how to become a locked door. She looked toward the service corridor, not the camera, not the chandelier, not the empty room. Dante leaned forward for the first time all night. Downstairs, Elsie reached for a folded towel with calm fingers, but her eyes had changed. She was no longer dancing. She was listening. The feed flickered again. This time, the kitchen corridor behind her was empty on one monitor and not empty on another. A shadow crossed the marble for less than a second, then vanished. Dante set down his whiskey without drinking. "Freeze the feed," he said softly. The room went colder. On the screen, Elsie lifted one hand to the lace edge of her apron, touching a tiny loose thread as if it had told her something no guard in the Bellini house understood. Then every monitor went black. For 7 seconds, every monitor in Dante Bellini's surveillance room stayed black, but downstairs, Elsie Whitaker did not scream. That was what mattered. In the white marble kitchen, she stood with one hand on the lace edge of her apron, listening to the silence after the feed died, as if silence had weight. The refrigerator still hummed. The chandelier still glowed. Somewhere beyond the service corridor, a door clicked once, too softly for anyone who had not spent months learning the mansion by sound. Elsie folded the towel over the red wine stain and moved toward the nursery tray as if she had not noticed anything at all. That was how women like her survived expensive houses. They did not get to panic. They got to be useful. At breakfast, the Bellini staff would pretend they had not watched her body take up space in the kitchen aisle. They would pretend their eyes had not measured the width of her hips against the narrow pantry door, the softness of her arms beneath the black sleeves, the way her white apron made her look more like property than a person to them. Mrs. Vale from housekeeping once told a new maid, not quietly enough, "Don't worry, the big one does the night shift. Nobody important sees her." Elsie had kept stacking porcelain cups with steady hands. She had learned long ago that cruelty loved an audience, and dignity survived best without begging for one. Her world was made of quiet tasks no one valued until they went wrong. Checking that the little boy's calming tea was warm, not hot. Setting his blue ceramic cup on the left because the right side frightened him after nightmares. Folding towels without sharp corners. walking slowly enough that a terrified child could follow her breathing instead of his own panic. She had never called it talent. Talent belonged to women in silk gowns under chandeliers. Elsie called it paying attention. Her body, broad and soft and solid, had been treated like an inconvenience in rooms built for thin women and colder hearts. Yet that same presence made frightened children lean closer. It made panicked animals stop thrashing. It made a doorway feel guarded without a single weapon raised. She did not shrink. Not anymore. She rinsed the towel, saw the wine dilute pink beneath the faucet, and noticed a second detail no one else would have cared about. The stain had not splashed outward like a spilled glass. It dragged toward the corridor in a thin line, as if someone had stepped in it and wiped the marble clean behind them. Elsie's fingers tightened once around the apron thread. Upstairs, somewhere deep inside the walls, power returned with a faint electrical sigh. A camera light blinked red over the pantry door. Then the kitchen entrance filled with a black suit wide enough to block the marble archway. One of Dante's bodyguards stood there, expressionless, hand near his jacket. He did not look at her face first. Men rarely did. Then his earpiece crackled, and his posture changed. "Miss Whitaker," he said, voice suddenly careful. "Mr. Bellini wants you upstairs. Bring the apron." "Bring the apron," the bodyguard repeated, and the words made the white marble kitchen feel suddenly smaller than a cage. Elsie did not argue. She untied the lace-trimmed apron with careful fingers, folded it once, and held it against her chest as she followed him through corridors where the lights dimmed automatically and black-suited men turned their heads a fraction too slowly. No one touched her. That was worse. In the Bellini mansion, being escorted without contact meant the house had already decided you were either evidence, a witness, or a problem too delicate to bruise. The elevator did not stop at the nursery floor. It rose past the guest suites, past the velvet hall where donors and criminals drank the same champagne, and opened into a private level Elsie had only seen on camera reflection in polished silver trays. A steel door waited at the end of the hall, guarded by two men with earpieces and hands resting near their jackets. One scanned her face, then the folded apron, then the soft fullness of her body in the black maid's dress, as if trying to understand why a nanny had been allowed near the heart of the Bellini house. Elsie lifted her chin. She had spent years being measured by people who mistook judgment for sight. She did not shrink for them. The door unlocked with a low metallic breath. Inside, the surveillance room was darker than the rest of the mansion, all black glass, velvet walls, and monitor light. 20 screens glowed across one side, frozen on different angles of the house. The nursery hall, the front gates, the service stairs, the kitchen where her own image stood paused beneath the chandelier, one hand at her apron thread. Dante Bellini stood in front of that screen in a black suit that looked less tailored than carved. He did not greet her. He did not apologize. He did not look embarrassed to have watched. That would have made him ordinary. Instead, he held silence like a weapon until every guard in the room seemed to breathe by his permission. Raphael Voss leaned near the control console, polished and calm, his silver cuff links catching the monitor glow. "Probably a system hiccup," Raphael said. "Kitchen feed gets temperamental after midnight." Dante did not turn. "It never gets temperamental when I am not watching." The room went still. Elsie felt the folded apron warm under her palms. On the center monitor, the frozen frame made her look exposed, caught in a private moment she had never meant to give anyone. Yet Dante's eyes were not on the shape of her body. They were on the loose white thread near her fingers, then on the timestamp below the image, then on the corridor camera beside it. "Put on the table," he said. Not cruel, not gentle. A command with no room around it. Elsie stepped forward between men who owned guns, contracts, and silence. The heavy table was black marble, cold enough to bite through her fingertips when she laid the apron down. A faint pink smear marked the lace where the wine-damp towel had brushed it. Dante noticed. Raphael noticed him noticing. Elsie noticed both. That was when she understood she was not there because she had danced. She was there because something in the room had moved while everyone else was looking at her. Dante finally faced her. His dark gaze cut through the monitor light. When the feed died, he said. "Why did you look at the corridor before you looked at the camera?" Elsie's mouth went dry, but her voice stayed low, because cameras only see where they're pointed. Before Dante could answer, the steel door opened behind her, bringing in perfume, diamonds, and a woman's soft laugh sharpened like a blade. Celeste Marrow paused at the threshold, her eyes dropping to the apron on the table. "Oh," she said sweetly, "are we finally discussing the help's little kitchen performance?" "Oh," Celeste Marrow said again, stepping into the surveillance room as if velvet ropes and armed men existed only to frame her entrance. "Are we finally discussing the help's little kitchen performance?" The words landed harder than a slap because she did not raise her voice. She smiled at the frozen image of Elsie on the monitor, then at the folded white apron lying on Dante's black marble table, and every man in the room understood permission had just changed hands, at least socially. Elsie felt the old burn rise beneath her skin, but she did not reach for the apron. She did not give Celeste the pleasure of seeing hunger for rescue. Raphael straightened beside the console, too calm, while Dante remained motionless in front of the screens. Celeste drifted closer to the table, diamonds whispering at her wrist. "I told Dante the night staff was getting sloppy," she said, "but I didn't realize the nursery help had turned the kitchen into a stage." Her manicured finger touched the lace edge of the apron. Elsie's stomach tightened, not because the cloth was expensive. It was not, because she had washed it herself, repaired that tiny inner seam herself, worn it through fevers, nightmares, spilled tea, and every hour no one else wanted. Celeste lifted the apron by 2 fingers as if it were something damp. Does she always dress like a tragic little maid and spin around after midnight? Or was tonight special? A guard's mouth twitched before he caught himself. Another looked away. That was the true cruelty of rooms like this. Not everyone laughed. Some people simply allowed the knife to stay in the air. Elsie kept her voice low. "That belongs to me." Celeste glanced over her shoulder, delighted. "So does the kitchen, apparently. The cameras. The corridor. The attention of men who should know better." She let the apron drop flat on the marble, spreading the white lace beside the pink smear. "Look at it. A servant's costume with wine on it." After she was alone in a restricted room. "If this were my house, I'd call it grounds for dismissal." The word dismissal struck the room like a verdict. Elsie saw it pass from guard to guard. A nanny without status, a woman too easy to replace, a body they had already decided did not belong on upper floors. Dante finally moved one hand, not toward Celeste, toward the monitor controls. The motion was small, but every bodyguard shifted. "No one deletes anything," he said. Celeste's smile thinned. "How dramatic. I'm only saying what everyone is thinking." Elsie looked at the frozen frame again. Her own hand near the apron thread. The marble island. The red wine smear. The corridor camera beside it. Then Celeste made her mistake. She tapped the monitor with one red nail and said, "The lower right feed proves she was alone." Elsie's pulse changed. No one had told Celeste which feed had gone dark. No one outside this room should know lower right from any other angle. Raphael's jaw tightened for less than a second, but Elsie saw it. She also saw the pink smear on the apron was not random. It curved in the same direction as the drag stain on the kitchen floor. Someone had brushed past her cloth after she stopped dancing. Dante's eyes cut to Elsie, sharp and silent. Celeste laughed softly. "What? Is the fat nanny going to explain surveillance now?" Elsie did not answer her. She looked at Dante, then at the apron, then at the corridor feed still frozen on the wrong second. And for the first time since she entered his world, Dante Bellini saw her choose not fear, but calculation. Elsie did not look at Celeste when the insult landed. She looked at the lower right monitor at the frozen wrong second, then at the pink curve drying into the lace of her apron. The room expected shame. It expected tears, a stammered apology, the soft collapse of a woman who had been told too many times that her body made her easier to dismiss. Elsie gave him none of it. She stepped closer to the black marble table, slow and steady, and placed one broad hand beside the apron without touching it. "That stain didn't come from the towel," she said. Celeste laughed once. "Listen to her. Now she's a detective. Raphael moved a fraction toward the console. Dante's eyes did not leave Elsie. Explain. One word, heavy enough to make the guards stop breathing. Elsie kept her gaze on the monitors because looking at Celeste would only feed the performance. When I cleaned the wine from the floor, it dragged toward the service corridor. Not splashed. Dragged. Someone stepped through it, then wiped the marble behind them. Her finger hovered above the lace smear. This touched them after I stopped dancing. Celeste's smile sharpened. Or you spilled wine on yourself while spinning around like, I know. Elsie said, not loudly, but the room heard the boundary. I was barefoot. Silence shifted. A guard glanced down at her feet before he could stop himself. Elsie turned slightly, letting them see the pale marble dust on her soles, the steadiness of her stance, the fact that she had crossed 3 floors of armed men without trembling apart. If I stepped in wine, it would be on my feet. It isn't. The smear is waist-height on the apron. Someone brushed past me in the dark, close enough to touch the lace. Raphael's jaw flexed again. He recovered quickly, too quickly. The feed was down. No one can prove that. Elsie finally looked at him. You can. The sentence landed like a glass cracking in a silent church. Dante's hand stilled beside the monitor controls. Raphael gave a thin smile. Careful, Miss Whitaker. I am careful, Elsie said. That's why I know the kitchen camera went black half a second after the corridor camera froze. Not before. The lower right feed should have shown the hall empty if it was live. But the reflection on the marble island still showed movement. One of the guards leaned toward the screen. Another whispered something into his cuff. Celeste's expression flickered, irritation cutting through her polish. This is absurd. She saw a shadow and invented a conspiracy because she's embarrassed. Elsie touched the loose thread inside the apron seam, then lifted it just enough for Dante to see the tiny dark fleck caught in the white stitch. Not wine. Something metallic, black, and oily. Then why does the cloth smell like your service elevator? Not the kitchen? Raphael's face changed before he could command it back. It was only a second, but Dante Bellini had built an empire out of seconds. The room turned toward Raphael. The guards no longer looked at Elsie as if she were furniture. They looked at her as if she had become a witness no one could afford to ignore. Dante's voice dropped to a dangerous calm. Run the corridor feed frame by frame. Raphael reached for the console. Elsie's hand moved first. She pressed the apron flat over the keyboard. Not hard, not frantic, just immovable enough to stop him. Her soft, heavy presence became a barrier between his fingers and the evidence. Not him, she said. Dante looked at her hand, then at Raphael, then at the frozen monitor where the wrong second still waited to betray someone. Everybody out, he said, except Miss Whitaker. The order did not sound loud enough to empty a room, but men obeyed it as if Dante Bellini had fired a gun. Bodyguards moved first, black suits shifting around Celeste Marrow's startled diamonds, then around Raphael Voss, whose hands still hovered inches from the console Elsie had blocked with her apron. Celeste opened her mouth to protest, but Dante did not look at her. That was worse than being silenced. The door closed on her perfume, Raphael's tightened jaw, and the soft, furious whisper of people who had just watched a nanny become dangerous without raising her voice. Elsie stayed where she was, her broad hand still pressing the lace-trimmed apron flat over the keyboard. Only when the lock clicked did she remove it. She expected Dante to accuse her. She expected questions meant to trap her, the kind rich men asked when they already knew which poor person would take the blame. Instead, he stepped closer to the monitors and rewound the footage himself. Frame by frame, the kitchen returned. Elsie beneath the chandelier, her body moving with that slow, grounded rhythm, the marble island catching reflections the camera had missed. Dante watched the frozen image of her dancing for 1 second too long. Not like Celeste had watched it, not like the guards had. He watched as if the movement itself had become evidence. You stopped before the feed died, he said. Elsie's throat tightened. I heard the service door breathe. His gaze cut to her. Doors don't breathe. This one does when the seal sticks. Her voice stayed low. It pulls air before it opens. The nursery door does it too when the heat is on. Children notice things like that when they're scared. So do people who work nights. Dante said nothing, but his hand slowed over the controls. He replayed the lower right feed. The corridor showed empty marble. The kitchen reflection showed a shadow. The timestamp shivered half a second out of rhythm. Elsie pointed once, then drew her hand back before touching his console again. Boundary, not fear. Dante noticed that too. You knew where the camera was, he said. Everyone who works here knows where the cameras are. No, he said. They know where not to steal. You knew where the camera stopped seeing. The words settled between them, colder than praise and more dangerous. Elsie looked at the apron in her hands, at the pink smear, the dark fleck caught in the inner stitch. I knew where I felt someone pass. For the first time, Dante turned fully toward her. Up close, he was all restraint. Black suit, pale shirt, dark eyes trained by violence to dismiss emotion as weakness. But his attention on her had changed. It did not soften. It sharpened. He was not looking through her anymore. Why didn't you say that downstairs? He asked. Elsie lifted her chin. Because downstairs, I was the fat nanny in the kitchen. People hear what they already decided. Dante's jaw tightened, but he did not apologize. He only looked at the monitor where Raphael's corridor remained falsely empty. And what did you decide about me? Elsie folded the apron once, protecting the stained lace between her palms. That you trust machines more than people. A silence fell so deep, even the wall of monitors seemed to hum quieter. Then Dante reached for the internal line. Lock Raphael Voss out of East Wing security. Audit every access point from midnight to now. No one touches the kitchen feed, except me. He paused, I still on Elsie. And Miss Whitaker. Elsie did not mistake it for trust. Not yet. It was a door opening 1 inch into a world that swallowed people whole. On the center monitor, the frozen kitchen reflection brightened as the system enhanced the image. Behind Elsie's dancing shadow, a man's gloved hand appeared in the service corridor, holding a Bellini access card that should never have left Dante's private level. The gloved hand on a monitor held Dante Bellini's private access card like confession, but Dante did not curse. He only went very still, and that was how Elsie understood the danger had moved from her humiliation into the bones of the house. That card opens 3 doors, he said. My office, this room, and the East Wing service corridor. Elsie looked at the frozen image, then at the white apron folded between her hands. Then someone wanted the corridor open while everyone was watching the kitchen. Dante's eyes moved to her. Not soft, not yet, but no longer distant. Raphael had clearance to audit locks, he said, not to carry my card. The internal phone buzzed once. A guard's voice came through, tense and low. Raphael Voss had left the private floor before the lockdown sealed. Celeste Marrow was refusing to leave the West Salon. 3 staff members had already heard that the nanny was being questioned over stolen footage. Elsie felt the old trap closing. Rich people did not need proof when gossip could do the execution for them. Dante watched that realization cross her face. You will stay on this floor until I know who touched that card. The sentence was not shouted, but it struck like a lock. Elsie's fingers tightened around the apron. No, 1 word, quiet enough to be mistaken for fear by men who did not know her. Dante turned fully toward her. A bodyguard shifted near the door. Elsie did not step back. If you need a witness, ask me to stay. If you need evidence, let me help protect it. But do not dress a cage up as protection and expect me to thank you for it. The room held its breath. Dante Bellini was not accustomed to refusal, especially not from a woman whose job description made her invisible to his world. For 1 dangerous second, the air seemed to sharpen around him. Then his gaze dropped to the apron in her hands, to the stained lace she had defended when no one else had, and something in his expression tightened like a door being locked from the inside. Then I'm asking, he said. Elsie swallowed once. For what? He tapped the monitor showing the kitchen reflection. Your eyes. The answer should not have affected her. It was not romance. It was not rescue. It was a man who trusted machines, realizing a woman he had watched in silence could see where his empire went blind. Still, The words landed somewhere under her ribs. Dante moved to the console and angled the chair away from his own body before offering it to her, without touching her. That restraint mattered. Elsie sat, broad shoulders squared, apron folded across her lap, and felt every camera in the mansion waiting. Dante stood behind her left side, close enough for her to smell smoke, wool, and cold whiskey, far enough that she did not have to forgive him for the surveillance. Together, they reviewed the East Wing feeds. Not the dance now, the spaces around it, the service door, the pantry arch, the nursery hall. On the third pass, Elsie lifted a hand. Stop. Dante froze the frame. The nursery tray she had prepared earlier sat on the kitchen counter, blue ceramic cup on the left, exactly where it belonged. But in the reflection of the marble island, the cup was on the right. Her stomach dropped. That isn't a delay, she whispered. That's a loop. Before Dante could answer, every monitor switched back to the live kitchen feed. The room was empty. Then the blue cup rolled slowly off the counter by itself and shattered across the marble. The blue cup shattered on the live kitchen feed, and every instinct in Dante Bellini's world moved toward violence. A bodyguard reached for the door. Dante's hand went to the console. But Elsie rose from the chair, so quickly the apron slid from her lap to the floor. No, she said. The word cut through the alarm before it could become chaos. Dante turned on her, dark eyes lethal. That was live. It was bait. Elsie pointed at the empty kitchen screen, then at the nursery hall frozen 2 monitors away. The cup was never supposed to be in the kitchen. I set it on the nursery tray. Left side. Always left side. Whoever moved it knew you'd watch the kitchen because you watched me there. One guard cursed under his breath. Dante did not. His stillness became more dangerous. Elsie stepped closer to the screens, broad shoulders squared, white apron at her feet like a fallen flag. Pull up the nursery hall audio. There's no alarm, the guard said. Because the hall is looped. Elsie snapped, then caught herself, breathing once through her nose the way she taught frightened children to breathe. Listen under the feed. Dante gave one nod. The room filled with low static, then the faintest sound, a wooden seal drawing air before opening. Elsie's blood went cold. That's the nursery door. Dante moved first, but Elsie was already past him. He won't open for men with guns, she said. He'll freeze. Let me go first. A bodyguard blocked her. Dante looked at the man once. The guard stepped aside. They reached the East Wing corridor in a rush of black suits and silent shoes. But Elsie slowed before the nursery, because panic moved faster than bullets. The door stood open 3 inches. Inside, the little boy was crouched beside the bed, hands over his ears, staring at a man in Bellini black who did not belong there. His glove held Dante's access card. His other hand held the nursery phone, ripped from the wall before it could ring. Elsie did not scream. She filled the doorway with her body, soft and solid and unmovable, blocking the man's view of the child. Look at me, she told the boy, not the intruder. Her voice dropped into the same rhythm as her midnight dance. Slow, grounded, safe. Left hand on the carpet. Breathe with my fingers. The man shifted toward her. Elsie braced one hand against the doorframe, using every inch of her weight as a living lock, not attacking, not flinching, simply refusing him space. Move, he hissed. Elsie's eyes stayed on the child. No, behind her, Dante's guard spread like a black wall. The intruder glanced past Elsie and saw the mistake too late. She had not chased the bait. She had brought the house to the real door. Dante's voice came from behind her, quiet enough to terrify. Hand where I can see them. The man dropped the nursery phone. A flash drive slid from his sleeve and skittered across the rug, stopping against the edge of Elsie's apron where it had dragged behind her from the surveillance room. Dante picked it up with a handkerchief. On the tiny silver drive, written in Celeste Marrow's elegant handwriting, was one word: kitchen. By the time Dante Bellini carried the flash drive into the West Salon, the mansion had already chosen its lie. Celeste Marrow stood beneath the chandelier with one hand at her throat, telling 3 frightened staff members that Elsie Whitaker had staged the entire kitchen scandal for attention. Raphael Voss stood near the velvet curtains, pale but composed, pretending not to watch the doors. Then Dante entered with Elsie beside him, the child safe behind 2 guards, and the white lace-trimmed apron folded over Elsie's arm like a banner recovered from battlefield. The room went silent before Dante spoke. That was his gift and his curse. People feared him enough to stop breathing, but tonight, for the first time, he did not use that silence to bury a woman's voice. He set the flash drive on the marble bar. He placed the stained apron beside it. Then he looked at Elsie. "Tell them." Celeste laughed, but it came out wrong. "Dante, surely you're not letting the nanny perform again." Elsie turned toward her, soft and large and steady in the middle of all that polished cruelty. "No," she said. "I'm explaining what you thought no one like me could understand." Dante nodded once to the guard at the wall. The salon's hidden screen came alive with surveillance logs, access trails, and the kitchen footage Celeste had tried to turn into a joke. The first clip showed Elsie dancing alone, not ridiculous, not obscene, not asking for anyone's attention. Just a woman breathing through a long night in the only room empty enough to hold her. A few staff members lowered their eyes. The second clip showed the half-second loop. The third showed Raphael's stolen access card opening the East Wing corridor. The fourth showed Celeste's message to Raphael, recovered from the drive, and matched her handwriting. "Kitchen. Make him watch her, then move the child." Celeste's face drained. Raphael stepped back. Dante's bodyguards closed the distance without raising their guns. "You used her body as a distraction," Dante said, voice low enough to freeze the blood in the room. "You used my cameras, my card, and my house to threaten my family." Celeste's diamonds trembled. "I never touched the child." Raphael panicked. "I only wanted to show you what she was. A servant. A joke. A woman like that doesn't belong beside." "Finish that sentence," Dante said. Celeste did not. Elsie did not smile. She did not need Celeste humiliated the way Celeste had tried to humiliate her. She needed the truth to stand upright where the lie had been sitting comfortably. "I want the footage of me deleted from every private device that received it," Elsie said. "Not hidden, deleted, logged, witnessed." Dante looked at his chief guard. "Done." "And the staff who shared it," Elsie continued, her voice steady though her hand tightened once on the apron, "will not work around children again." Dante's eyes did not leave her face. "Done." The power in the room shifted so visibly that even the chandelier seemed to hang lower. Celeste had expected Dante to defend Elsie like property. Instead, he let Elsie set the terms of her own dignity. Raphael was forced to his knees only when the guards removed the Bellini card from his jacket and found 3 more cloned keys beneath the lining. Celeste's phone rang once, then again, each call a door closing. Her foundation account frozen, her family's credit line severed, her name removed from every Bellini guest list in Manhattan before she could invent another version of the story. Dante did not touch Elsie until the room had watched every piece of evidence turn against the people who had laughed at her. Then he reached into his pocket and placed a black steel key on the folded apron. Not a ring, not a necklace, a key. "This opens the private level, the nursery wing, and the surveillance room," he said. A murmur passed through the staff. Dante let it. "From tonight forward, no camera in this house is reviewed without Miss Whitaker's access code. No staff file concerning the child is approved without her signature. No guest enters the East Wing if she says no." Celeste stared at him as if he had lost his mind. Elsie stared at the key as if it weighed more than any apology could. "I'm not your secret," she said quietly. Dante's mouth barely moved, but every person heard him. "No, you are the woman I trust inside the heart of my house." The words did not make her smaller. They did not rescue her from herself. They placed her where everyone had insisted she could never belong, at the center, standing tall in her black dress. Her white apron no longer a servant's costume, but proof of the night she had saved them all. Later, when the West Salon emptied and Celeste's name vanished from the Bellini world like smoke, Dante brought Elsie back to the surveillance room. This time, he did not sit behind her and watch. He stood beside her as the monitors reflected both of them in the dark glass. Elsie slid the black key into the console. The kitchen feed appeared first, white marble, silent chandelier. the room where she had once danced alone. Dante looked at the screen, then at her. Elsie did not look away. And for the first time in that mansion, the camera was not taking something from her. It was waiting for her permission.